Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today, I wanted to talk about something that I think is extremely important and doesn't get discussed much at all. I've found throughout the years that a lot of teachers and students just actually sort of avoid it and move on or around the idea. Um, Plurality forces you to take a deep dive into the major scale and understand that when you build chords from it, a lot of them don't work and are not acceptable in modern harmony. And so, uh, if you're at an intermediate level, you may have already built, let's say, triads up from each note of the major scale in four part. And when I was younger, I realized one of my teachers, that's sort of where we stopped at four part chords. And then after that, I was learning just arbitrary shapes here and there. Here's a major 9 chord, here's an 11 chord. And so there was no real discussion about certain things, especially regarding the one chord in a key, which, if we talk about its stack or chord family, which is the way we think of it in fretboard freedom as a family, that would be the one chord in C would be C major 13 sharp 11. Okay? Well, that implies something other than the C major scale. And this has been sort of the bane of my existence of 40 years of teaching, is teaching beginning intermediate students the very first chord type that you want to work on, which is major, and explaining that there's two scales that need to be considered in that chord family. And so I'll just go back for a second. When I was younger and very much my focus was on rock and progressive rock, and I, like everybody else, I'd go out and get a songbook and I'd try to get in the head of some of the writers that I liked. And so at least 50% of these tunes, I'd look at them and they'd be in a key. I'll just be in C here for simplicity's sake. And it's everything's going along fine, whatever, and then all of a sudden there's a chord, D flat 9. And if you have no harmony background, you just look at that and it might as well be a completely different language. What is that doing there? Where did the writer come up with that chord type? Another example that's really common, this is even better, is your C major 7 to E7, right, to A minor 7. We've heard that in everything from folk tunes, country, rock, ballads, and if you add on extensions, then we can talk about smooth jazz and jazz. And so this idea has been around for decades. But what is E7 to the key of C major? It has nothing to do with the key of C major. And so that's just, the word is arbitrary, right? These chords just seem arbitrary to anybody who has very little background in harmony and theory. So, what the beautiful thing about plurality is, it helps us to boil everything down to 2, 5, 1. And so if you're more in the beginning stage, you may be already yelling, well, what about the 4 chord, the 3 chord, the 6 chord, the 7 chord? Well, that's what plurality does. It takes care of those and gives you an idea of how you can think of those chords in a different way as all being what we call upper extensions of, again, either a 2-chord, a 5-chord, or a 1. Why would we want to do that? In improvisation, when we're looking at a chart and these chords are, could be flying by at 150, 200 BPM, and if here's just 2514. Well, if I'm going D Dorian, G Mixolydian, C Ionian, F Lydian, I'm in big trouble. Those chords are already gone by the time I figured out what the scale source is for it. So what world-class players, professional players, improvisers do is they look at a chart and start looking at key centers, tonal centers. And that way, this is all in the same key, and now they understand what the scale source is for that key, and they can then use their thinking to do more important things like target or phrase or whatever it is. Okay, so now it also, I'm just talking about in one key here for a second, but what if we go into another key? Well, the same thing. When everything's boiled down to 2-5-1, then life becomes much simpler as well when we're talking about momentary key changes. And please understand, I am not talking about jazz. Jazz has way more momentary key changes in it than other styles of music. But we can go to the most basic rock stuff and find a 1 chord here, there. Not a 1 chord. Find 1 chord here or there that goes into another key. And I can give you hundreds of examples of that from music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and in rock, in country, in every style. Okay? So momentary key changes shouldn't, those of you who know what I'm about a little bit, I always talk about this because after 40 years of having students, many of them going, oh no, don't teach me that chord because I'll become a bebop player. This is reality. Momentary key changes, and that's the only way to say it. It's, if we're in another key, we're in another key. So to some people, saying momentary key change, their eye glaze over and they go, oh, you're talking about jazz. No, it's applicable to every style. Okay, so when we think in terms of everything being 2-5-1, momentary key changes don't scare us anymore. And so, as I said, when I was younger, I would get these songbooks and find these arbitrary chords, and it didn't mean anything to me, and so it became very frustrating, and I didn't want to get into harmony until I got with a great teacher who started to talk about chord families. So chord families are just chord stacks, and family I think is really appropriate because all the interior chord types, triads, 4-part, 5-part, 6-part, 7-part chords, they're all become interchangeable, like a family, in a sense that all functions the same way. All the chords in the chord family function the same way in a key. And now I'm not going to talk about the different chords, how they function. That's a real harmony lesson. But that's the idea of chord families. So once I started getting that nailed down, everything became clear, no matter how sophisticated or not. And anybody can do that. It's not rocket science. You learn the chord families, and you can look at a big band chart or a film score or a funk thing with horns. You look at the chord progression, you know exactly what's going on. And you know, in a big band chart, you find things where there's a chord every eighth note. Doesn't matter. I know what every one of those chords is, why they're there, what they're doing, how they function, what their scale source is, and you can do that too. You can do that too, and not in years. It takes some work, but a real year of studying, and you're done. You're done no matter what the style, no matter what the tune is. You'll never be confused again. But we're talking about plurality, and that's the step just before the chord families. Okay? And we're going to talk only about the major scale. When I say 2-5-1, everything is 2-5-1, I mean 2-5-1 in major or 2-5-1 in minor. But we're not going to talk about 2-5-1 in minor because that's called altered harmony, and that gets into a real barrel of gummy worms. Okay? So let's take the major scale. We'll go C major scale. All right. We know when we build triads up from each note of the scale, etc. So we got major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and it's all fine, right? It all works. There's no problem. I can do the same thing with 4-part. Major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, and minor 7 flat 5. Okay? And I'll just go back in my history again for a second. I remember when the teacher I had, that was as far as we went. It was 4-part. And I was, I'd come back a couple of weeks later, later going, okay, I'm ready to get into 5-part and 6 and 7-part implied. And I just, here's a major 9 shape. Just another, that's arbitrary to me again. It's like, it's not systematic like we do this and we know. But you can't do that when it starts to get into 5 and 6 and 7-part implied chords. And we're going to talk about why, because it's the most important thing to do with the major scale. Okay? So here's starting on C, and we're going to use all 7 notes to build our chord stack. That's what a chord family is using all 7 notes of the major scale stacked in thirds on top of each other. Here's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Okay? So if we put all those notes on top of each other, we'd end up with what would be considered a train wreck. Okay? And here's the reason why. Here's the root again. There's the third. E. Now if I continue on to the 11th, that's just the 4th, an octave higher. When that happens, this is the sound you get. This beautiful. Now I've talked about this in other lessons. I'm going to try to come at it for some of you from a different point of view and just get through it very quickly. But flat 9 intervals, that's what that's called, a flat 9. Right, here's an octave, that's an 8, and then if we went up to the next note, F or F sharp, that would be flat 9 or a major 9. So this sound is not acceptable at any level in diatonic harmony, meaning within the major scale. not in the 1 chord, not in the 2 chord, and not on the 5 chord. Now, for those of you who may know of chord types like G7 flat 9, that is not part of diatonic harmony. That's part of altered harmony. So flat 9 interval, no good under any conditions when we're talking about the major scale. And unfortunately, we're going to find a few circumstances where that comes up, and we absolutely have to avoid it. And we'll just start with, have you ever seen a C major 11 chord? If you have, if somebody actually wrote that, they were either playing playing a prank on you, or they don't understand harmony. There's no such thing as a C major 11 chord. Okay? Just, you'll never find it. If somebody tells you there is, they are wrong. This is it for the rest of your life. You can know there's no such thing as C major 11 chord. Okay? So, what somebody did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, whenever it was, they said, well, theoretically, all the notes of the chord should be able to be stacked and be used as resting tones when you improvise. But I'll tell you, and this will be proof of the pudding for you. If you great rock players, great country players from the 60s and 70s, who some of them who had no harmony background at all, knew better than to use the 4th or the 11th as a resting tone. Their ear already told them, no. It's terrible. So you'd never hear them do it. Not only that, not only as a resting tone, but they wouldn't end a phrase that way. Because that accentuates this terrible sound. So the good old major scale isn't so good after all. It's problematic. And we're going to get even farther into how much of a problem it really is. So this has been the bane of my existence, is trying to teach beginning and intermediate students who don't have a harmony background what should normally be the most basic, obvious idea is, hey, you take the C major scale and you can build chords from the whole scale and there's never going to be any problem. And it's the exact opposite. Out of 9 different chord families, I think this one is the toughest to explain and to sell to students, because it uses 2 different scales. So you might say, well, if you got C major, can you use the C major scale to improvise over it? Yes. But do you sit on the note F ever? No. F is what we call, or the 4th degree, is what has to be considered a passing tone. We don't sit on it, we move from one note to the next. That's what we mean by passing. Just sort of a quick there and you're gone. You could start on it, never sit on it. There it is. There's the sound. So we know whether, doesn't matter stylistically, again, we hear the greatest, especially country players. You never hear a great country player just sit on that. Just really is terrible. So what happens is we came up with the idea, somebody did, of raising that note up a half step to F sharp. And that was a great idea. Now we've got 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11. Sharp means we're raising, right? Sharp 11, 13. Beautiful. Every note's a resting tone now. It's a great target tone. Now, that may sound, for those of you who are not into jazz, that may sound pretty jazzy. But I'm going to tell you, there's rock tunes that are just expressly using that sound. And I'm sure you can already tell just by that. Okay, so when we raise the 4, that's called Lydian. You can put that in your brain, in the bank, forever. Lydian means raised 4, or sharp 11, being the same note, just up an octave. Lydian, raised 4, always, forever, for the rest of your life. That's all it means, raised 4. Okay? So, now, when we have raised the 4th, what happens is we have to change the scale. That's not the C major scale anymore, is it? It's now C Lydian, which is the same thing as G major. Right? G major has 1 sharp in it. F sharp, well, that's the note we're talking about here, folks. So, instead of this, we've got this. Okay? So, we don't have to use F sharp. Again, we're talking about, if you want to use F, use the major scale, you can just use it as a passing tone. That's that sound. And with the sharp 11, that's that sound. So it's not as huge a problem as it may seem, okay? But when we make a chord stack where we say, hey, can you rest on a note, on every note, theoretically? With Lydian, yes. Sounds great. Okay, so this is, I did this as quickly as I could because it's so important to the idea of plurality. Okay, so now we've realized there's 2 scales that we have to deal with when we talk about the 1 chord in major. Okay, now if we remember, I said here we can build triads up from the C major scale. Beautiful, no problem. And then 4-part, same thing. When we get to 5-part, let's try that, building a chord off the 3rd note of the major scale. Here's E, G, B, D. There's E minor 7. Everything's great, no problem. Until we want to go to a 5-part chord, and now we've got F. And there's that sound again. Okay? So this is where a lot of, I'm not trying to put anybody down or anything, where a lot of teachers sort of stop, and they haven't gone through, like I said, the deep dive into the major scale, and so you're sort of left not really getting it, not really understanding what's going on. So there's no such thing as an E minor 7 flat 9 chord. It's not available, and it shouldn't be. It sounds bad. So what we do when we say, okay, well, there's such a thing as a 3 chord. Yes, there is, but it can only be 4-part at its very best. So what we do in plurality, we say something different. We say E minor 7. If you put a C in the bass, that's the upper extension of C major 9. Okay? E minor 7, C in the bass, and that's plurality. That's plurality, okay? E minor 7 with a C in the bass equals C major 9. So does it mean we can't go to a 3-chord? No. It just means the way you think of it is as a you think of it in a different way. And that way, again, everything boils down to 2, 5, 1, which simplifies our world in order to improvise and to use our thinking during improvisation in a different way, in a better way, in a more useful way. Okay? So, 3-chord, upper extension of a 1. Okay? And that's good because, as I said, we can't go any farther than a 4-part chord. So a 3-chord doesn't stand up when you put all 7 notes on top of each other. Like it didn't stand up with C major. It doesn't stand up with E minor. I'm sorry. And there's actually something worse than that. There's 2 flat 9 intervals. But we don't even need to go there. We know the 3-chord doesn't work as a chord stack past 4-part. Okay? So that takes us then to some other chords. We talked about the 3-chord. Let's talk about the 6-chord, A minor in the key of C. So A minor triad's great, A minor 7's great, and actually everything works out fine until you get to the 7th, and there it is again. Okay? Now, I just want you to think about this for a second. If we say C major 6, that's a 1 chord. C, E, G, A, beautiful. Well, A minor 7, wait a minute, A, C, E, G, those are the exact same notes. So many people would say this, A minor 7, is a direct substitute, an inversion, which it really is, of C6. So the 6th chord, again, it's thought of as what we call a plural substitute for the 1 chord. So let me give you an example. We've got F, 4 chord to 5 to 1. How many times have we heard this? Well, that's just the basis for about 1 billion tunes. Right? Rock tune after rock tune, but all the way up to film scores, you hear this. With strings. So it's very, very common. What's happening is we're replacing the 1 chord with the 6, and now we've got it's just a different sound, isn't it? We've got a different bass tone. Okay? And it's very cool. That works. So when I see that on a progression, it doesn't matter if it's in the key of C or any other key, I automatically know what's going on. This is the relative minor, isn't it? A minor 7. So we can think that way and just say, okay, 4, 5, 1 in minor, okay? Which we're going to talk about that, because that is the real reason I'm doing this video, is to talk to you about the idea of 2 scales that we talked about with the C major, with the 1 chord in C. So, just to finish it off, we'll just look at it this way. The 4 chord is considered the upper extension of a 2. If I play F major triad and put a D in the bass, F minor 7. If I do that with F major 7, there's D minor 9. So there's plurality in force again. F major over D equals D minor 7. So a 4 chord is a plural substitute for 2. Okay? Once you accept these things, it's not a big deal. We're not saying there's no such thing as 4-5-1 or any of that stuff. You know, the 4-5-1 is the foundation of country, of rock, of blues. So I get that, but this way is going to simplify everything for you when it starts to get a little tougher and we start to get out of the key that we're in and get into momentary key changes. Okay? So, the 3 chord, upper extension of a 1 chord. The 6 chord, a direct replacement or plural substitute for 1. Both of those are plural subs for 1. F major, 4 chord, plural substitute for 2. And last but not least is the 7 chord, which is minor 7 flat 5. And of course, it's going to have the same problems as you move up to the next note and the next note. So where we're going to find that flat 9 interval. So this, and many of you may already know this because it's sort of common, this is the upper extension of a 5 chord. 7 for 5. 7 is a plural substitute for 5. There's G9, right? Okay. And if you decide to get into advanced harmony, that concept becomes so huge in this context, in the world of the 5 chord. Okay. Okay, so there we go. 3 and 6, plural subs for 1. 4 chord, a plural substitute for 2. And a 7 chord is a plural substitute for 5 chord, for dominant chord. Okay, now, this is the last thing I just want to get into. I know it's a lot to take in, especially if you're more of a beginner, but I wanted to talk about the relative minor, which we did a little bit here, right? I said, hey, we've heard this forever. Great. 4, 5, 6. But we say the 6 chord is a minor 7 chord. Remember, we said that's a plural substitute for 1. But when this is home bass and now we're in minor, 4, 5, 6, relative minor, we can use one of 2 scales, just like we can do with the real 1 chord. I could use the F natural as a passing tone, or I can use F sharp as a resting tone. same exact thing works for the 6. There's F. So I've got this A. We never rest on the note F because we end up with that. But just like with C major, we can use it as a passing tone. Or we can use F sharp. And we can use it as a resting tone. And it's a cool sound, especially coming from here. Like you're using F major, and then you get to A minor, and then you change it up. It's its own really unique sound. But what happens when we change that to F sharp and A minor? We're in A minor now. Well, that note means we're playing the scale G major again. And if A is in the bass, that's A Dorian. Okay? Now, it takes some work, and I would write these things out and look at them and really get into it. Like I said, a deep dive. But what you'll find out is that A Dorian and C Lydian are the exact same scale, G major. That's it. So if I go 4, 5, 1, I can use C major or C Lydian, which is G major. If I go 4, 5, 1 in minor, I can use C major or A natural minor or A Dorian, which is G major. That's Dorian. That's natural minor or Aeolian. Okay? It's so important to understand this, the two scale aspect of this, and understand that the major scale is not an end-all. It has some real problems to it, and what I've just given you is a way to understand how we get rid of those problems forever. So there's a lot of things you're not going to see a C major C major 11 chord. You're not going to see an E minor 7 flat 9 chord. And there's some other rules, like with the 5 chord. If you've got G11, you can never play the 3rd because of that flat 9. So this may be technically difficult for you right now. Take your time with it. Explore the major scale. Build the 7-part chords up from each note, and you'll start to recognize instantly where is that note F above E. Where, in other cases, where is the note C above B? That's another flat 9 interval you'll find in the major scale. And we have to avoid those. There's no getting away from it. And when you start to look at song after song, regardless of the style, you'll see those chords don't exist. They're not there. And you have to ask yourself why. And so if I have something that's going 2, 5, 1, and then it goes 2, 5, 3, I don't care. It's all C major to me. And I don't sit on the note F. Right? So, hope that helps and clears things up instead of making it worse. But this is something you can't get away from. And the sooner you get it, the better everything else is going to be in terms of, and again, any style of music, you're going to see what you can do when you see like C major 7 in a songbook. Then you say, oh, I can play C major 7, or I can play C major 9, or C major 6 9, but if I want to put the 11th in, I know what I got to do now. If I want to play C major 9 sharp 11, that's what it's got to be. It can't be C major 11. All right, so that's the real work, and you can spend a few weeks easily just going through this stuff, but it's worth every ounce of your time. And once you've got that nailed down, you've got the preface for looking at every chord family, and like I said, in a year, even less, you could know how every song, you'd be able to justify every chord in any song, in any style. Okay, folks, hope that helps. We'll see you next time. Thanks.